tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Adrienne Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is author Adrienne Sharp and writer-performer Sandy Wolshin. Author, teacher Adrienne Sharp studied at ballet school from the age of 7, with dreams of becoming a dancer for George Balanchine. Her training continued at the Harkness Ballet School in New York, and she went to USC, Johns Hopkins, University of California at San Diego. And I like the idea of your PR talking about directional, dysfunctional dance? What is that? What is a dancer? Are they dysfunctional?
I think dancers aren't dysfunctional. They just function best in the world that they're grown to function in.
Oh, that's a great answer. Let's start with your training, Adrienne.
Well, I started when I was 7, like most little girls, and I started at Miss Ellen's studio, and I think most girls start out at Miss Somebody's studio,
Right.
Miss Debbie's, Miss Linda's. And I think, like my character in my book, Sandra, and all the other girls who start ballet at 7, you have no idea what you're in for. You're just going to go take class once a week. Mm-hmm. But what is really going on in these little schools is they're trolling grounds for talent, and they're looking for girls that have the right body type and have a facility for movement. And those little girls are going to find their training intensified. By the time I was 10, I was taking class every day. I was on full scholarship. By the time I started high school, I'd whittled down my high school schedule to 3 classes in the morning, and then I went off to ballet school and I studied for 5 hours in the afternoons and on Saturdays.
Where was that?
That was at Metropolitan School of Ballet in Bethesda, and my teachers were Charles Dixon and Ellen Woodard, who had both danced with London Festival Ballet.
So they came, found you as you were a young girl going to weekly dance classes, and you describe in your book the way they look at your body and how they continue to look at it. How do they do that?
Depends what school you're in. If you're at School of American Ballet, where they are absolutely training girls to go into their company, New York City Ballet and other companies, if you're gaining weight or if your proportions aren't looking right, they're going to ask you to leave, and they're not going to keep you on scholarship.
So they won't keep you in the school that's feeding the ballet, more or less. Is that right?
But you can study at the more minor schools, no matter what your body type. But in some ways, it's a necessary cruelty to eliminate girls who aren't talented enough, aren't advanced enough, or don't have the right bodies. Otherwise, they're being encouraged in this incredibly demanding, series of years of training for no purpose whatsoever, and missing out on, as I did, a lot of academics that leave you somewhat unprepared if dancing doesn't work out.
So we're back to that point where you went to these schools to take writing classes, I guess. You took writing at SC. Did you know you were going to be a writer then at that point?
No. When I was little, my dad would be driving me to class every day, of course, and picking me up, and we'd have this argument where I'd say, dance is life, and he would say, no, literature is life. He had always wanted to be a writer. He'd always wanted to be a writer. So when I quit ballet, for a long time, I floundered, as most girls do. Whether you're leaving at 18, 25, or 35 at the end of your career, you have to find something new to do.
At 35, that's pretty something, isn't it, to say the end of your career at 35? Some people are just beginning their careers.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of how the character in your book is, right? She's ending her career and someone else is beginning.
My character is just beginning her career, and I think all dancers have a sense of time's running out always. From the time that you're 10, you know that time's running out. You have to get a certain level of technique under your belt by a certain amount of time, or you won't be taken into a company.
When talking about the physical attributes, you say they look at your body, and one of the things was you said the torso's too short all of a sudden. I mean, it changes as you're growing older?
It's hard to tell when you're little what you'll look like at 16, and that's why Balanchine always talked about looking at the mothers along with the girls. And
is that right?
to get an idea of the future prospectus of this body.
And what happens, though? What do they look for? That one thing?
Balanchine liked a small head, a long neck, a short torso, long legs, and
So
long
short
feet.
And long feet, big feet.
But I'm happy to say I think there's more variety in companies now, but for a long time that body type reigns supreme.
When did you decide then that you were finished with ballet? Because you went to Harkness, right?
I went to New
was a
York.
good...
I went to New York at 17, and I was a trainee for Harkness Ballet, and it was a 2-year program. The first year you were on scholarship, the second year you were apprenticed to the company. But within a few months, I rapidly lost direction. All of us I was living in a girls' residence hall. We're suddenly no longer the stars of our local schools. We were the cream of the crop from all over the country, come to New York.
That's true.
And the attention of the teachers was scattered. They didn't know what we did outside of the dance classes. We weren't being coddled or taken care of. There were no parents around. It's a very lonely time. And it was a lonely time at School of American Ballet also
Did you
for
go
the girls there. I auditioned there, and the Russian ladies took a look at me and decided I wasn't advanced enough. And my mom had a conniption fit.
I was going to say, how do you take it? Your mom had a conniption, but how did you take it? I mean, it's so much rejection.
It was...
In a way, like, your leg's not long enough. I mean, that's pretty tough. You've been dancing for... what, 12 years, 14 years, and your legs aren't long enough. Your feet aren't big enough.
It's
your arches
the day you gotta face, It's the day you gotta face. But luckily, there are more than one school in New York, and so I auditioned at several and got a scholarship at one. And most of the girls from my school and other local schools in Washington found their way in. Washington was a big feeder school for American Ballet Theater, and a lot of girls at neighboring schools, Susan Jaffe, Cheryl Yeager, Amanda McCarrow, Julie Kent, all came out of D.C. and ended up
they did.
having quite the careers.
Yeah, because they were prima, right? They were
ballerinas,
dancers.
yes.
So then, here we are, you're at Harkness. Why did you stop?
I think simply lack of direction and a sense of boredom.
Really?
Well, it's very boring to take class day after day with no clear future in sight. And I was tired of looking at myself in the mirror. And in writing about dance, I get to dream myself into other people's lives and imagine other situations. I think I was always a dreamer, though I didn't realize it. I love to study the old photographs of old dancers and dream about their lives. The transition to writing about dancers was not immediate, however.
Yeah, how did you get into that? Did you go to college first then? I mean,
yes.
College to take writing lessons?
I studied literature and writing as an undergraduate and then as a graduate at Hopkins.
Oh, you did?
It wasn't until I went to the University of Virginia on a Hoynes Fellowship that I studied with Peter Taylor, and I wrote my first story about a dancer.
Black Swan, White Swan?
It was one of the stories from White Swan, Black Swan.
Tell us about White Swan, Black Swan.
Well, this was a collection
the
of...
Tchaikovsky, right?
It came from Swan Lake, so it's both the beautiful and the tragic, and since a dancer's life is both of those things, the collection was a series of fictional characters mixed in with biographical characters. And I wrote the first one when I was about 25, 26, so 8 years after I quit dancing. And Peter Taylor, who was a lovely Southern gentleman, read the story and said, you need to figure out what you want to say about this world of ballet. And at the time, I went home and tossed the story in a drawer because I didn't know what he was talking about. I don't know what larger issues he wants me to focus on about ballet. I came back to it a few years later, and suddenly I understood there were a lot of things, a lot of adult issues to explore in fiction that Angelina Ballerina can't explore.
Exactly.
Some of those things are the very short season a dancer has to perfect her craft, the devastating effect AIDS had on companies in the 80s.
So you went through this list and you start putting your mind different things that were happening?
I found characters that intrigued me and situations they would face, the desire to have more in your life than dancing, or the conflict of genius and muse, or facing an illness such as AIDS.
So then, after you put those stories together, First Love, which I call a historical novel in a way, because as I read through it, there's so much fact. How did you get all this fact?
I read many biographies of George Balanchine, and I also drew on the many articles written about him, my own experiences.
Details of his apartment and his clothes, and your character follows him down a hallway and describes what he's doing. I think this, to me, it's so much of the time, which was, what time is it, like the
81 to 83, and very much the height of the ballet boom with Baryshnikov at American Ballet Theatre, both dancing and directing, and Balanchine creating his last works.
The one thing that I did say is you took a little poetic license by putting Rudy Nureyev and Sasha Godunov in that period.
They were there in that period, but not exactly that exact year here and there.
I see.
So I moved them around so that my characters could interact with them and have some resonance with them.
Have you gotten any feedback from any of the dancers saying, why did you use my character?
No, I think they're all public figures and have been written about so much. I did send the book to Bernard Taper, who's Balanchine's premier biographer, and he read through it and helped me. There weren't too many things I'd gotten wrong, and you know, a sofa was blue silk, not blue velvet.
Oh,
or,
yeah,
you know, little
because
details like that.
They're so precise, and I think when you're reading a novel, you always think all of this is made up, but everything in the backstory of your piece is real.
Balanchine's character and the first part of the book, his actions, are drawn from fact. The muse I created for him, her boyfriend, their families, their apartments are entirely fictional, and all Balanchine's interactions with this imagined muse are fictional.
But you did read some biographies. You read Allegra Kent's, and you read Meryl Ashley's, and who else?
Maria Tallchief's, articles on Tennequilla Clerc, Suzanne Farrell's, the Gelsey Kirkland's. So there are many portraits of Balanchine. What I found strange about all those portraits is though they were married to the man, they didn't seem to penetrate to the center of his being. Their portraits are very cardboard of him. And so in my book, I took the, you know, kind of audacious tack of trying to imagine what it would be like to be Balanchine in these scenes other people observed of him.
Yeah, but those were, like Maria Tallchief was his wife, and he had, what, 5 wives, 4 wives? 5, and he was always creating work for them. Maybe just looked at them as, you know, some goddess, and they never had this big interaction.
He fell in love with the way they looked and the way they moved, and he pursued them through his art and through what he created for them. And I think the greatest drama in their lives was the one played out in rehearsal and on stage rather than at home.
Yeah, that's a great way to end. And I love First Love, as I said, because there's so much in there. It's so rich. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Adrienne Sharp. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Sandy Wolshin. Somebody asked me, I don't know who it was. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Sandy Wolshin, our guest, is one of 6 children whose names begin with the letter S. She was born and raised in Florida till at 9, when her father packed the car and took the family traveling. She has a Russian background, even though she came from a Cuban neighborhood. She had a Russian Orthodox mother and a Russian Jewish father, and that's a big background in your life. How did the backgrounds collide?
They danced with each other.
You had a flamenco dancer mother
yes,
too?
I had a mother who was my father was a Russian Jew. My father was Jewish, and but he wasn't a stereotypical Jewish guy. He wasn't a doctor or lawyer. He liked camping. He was a Jewish outdoorsman.
That's too funny.
Chicken
That's a
soup.
joke in itself,
Yep.
right?
Chicken soup on an open fire, matzo balls on a stick, circumcision by the lake. He was one of the National League. He was one of the members of the National League of Jewish Outdoorsmen.
Oh, he made his own national league?
Yeah, 3 of the nicest guys you ever met in your life.
That's really cute, though, because who were all the S's in your family?
We were all named after my great-grandmother, Sarah. So he named us all S. Sonia, Stanley, Sandy, Susan, Stephen, and Sheila.
Really?
Yeah, we're all S's.
Well, you brought what your mother used.
Yeah, now my mother...
You brought what your mother used
yes.
when she was on stage. But,
Yes.
or did you learn this in your Cuban neighborhood?
No, my mother was a Russian gypsy flamenco dancer.
She really was?
Yes. And so my father was Jewish and my mother was a gypsy.
Yeah.
And I was a smart kid. I stole from my mother and sold it back to my father.
That was great. Where did you study, Sandy?
You know, I studied on the road, actually. I studied in UCLA, Santa Monica College, privately. Stanley Myron Handelman was a teacher of mine for stand-up, but my father...
But for stand-up, basically, right? Not college. You didn't go to college.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I went to UCLA. I was a Spanish major at UCLA.
Oh, so you had to have castanets.
That was my final, yes. I was a performer, but parents get nervous when you're a performer, especially from the generation my parents came from. So they wanted me to have something solid, like a Spanish degree.
Oh, so they did. So
yes.
you did go to
yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But since I was a performer, for my final, that's what I did do, is play the castanet.
And you actually did? I think that's the hardest thing to learn how to do. I always, as a child, everyone always wants to play the castanets,
Right.
but you can never make them work. It's like holding them together and going, I'm making
that's one
sound
way.
coconut.
That's one way to do it. Why not?
Yeah. That was good. But so the stand-up then came after college or during the same time?
Well, it was, my father had a hypnotic act in the Borscht Belt. So
your father was performing
yeah,
too.
he was a performer. So I was raised with a father who did shtick all the time.
Well, what about the other kids?
Yeah.
Were they picking up too?
They're not in the professional show business, but they're all very funny in their own right.
They are.
Yes. When we all get together, it's quite a blast.
When did you start doing stand-up then? Late night stand-up, as you say you did.
Early 20s.
Oh,
Early
you did?
20s, my first time on stage. I didn't have an act. I didn't know I needed one. I had my castanets.
Oh, you actually used these? This wasn't like
Well-
a mimicking your mother type of thing?
Well, I just knew, I knew I had a funny bone, and I just wanted to do comedy, so I thought that what would happen, it was very naive, that once you get up there, that the funny magic would just happen.
Yeah, like in your family, like when you're
Right,
standing there and they're
right.
laughing at you.
So I just got up there, and I said, all right. And nothing happened. I tried it again. All right. Because I had used that phrase a lot at the football games. So I was kind of waiting for my comedy touchdown. And then I realized that I needed an act.
And talking about the football games, you were a cheerleader for the Raiders.
That's right,
Was
yeah.
that before then?
That was all kind of all together. Yeah,
and how
all
did you do
together.
that? How did you audition? How did you get the job? How long did you have it?
Well, over 1,000 girls try out to be a Raiderette. That's what we're called, kind of like a raisinette, except we dance. 3 things to become a professional cheerleader. First, you have to be able to do some very difficult dance steps. Okay, careful. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, that's first.
That's the first dance step, your hair?
Second, you have to have good hand coordination. And third and most important, you have to be a good public speaker. Thanks.
That was it, and you won.
Yes.
You did better than anyone.
And I made it.
Yes, you made it. That's great. But the interesting thing is you're doing all this we're talking about is all this background turned out to be a one-woman play called The Rabbi and the Cheerleader.
Right, okay.
Okay, we've got the cheerleader part of it, and we've got your travels, and we know what you were doing, but how did you get to Judaism? You had a Russian Orthodox mother.
Yes, not Jewish.
Not Jewish. So how'd you get to Judaism?
And I had,
and the rabbi.
I had a father, Jewish, but not observant.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he was the strong will in the family, and I always felt Jewish. I always identified with the Jewish people, but I didn't know anything about Judaism, bagels, cream cheese, and jokes. And I thought, there's got to be more to it than that. And so I started taking classes.
Oh.
Because I always felt like I had a Jewish soul.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And then they tell you to find a temple where you feel comfortable. So I started at Reconstruction, and then Reform and Conservative and Conservadox, and I end up at an Orthodox temple on a Friday night.
And that was where you felt comfortable?
I felt
Orthodox?
comfortable because they had the separation. I thought it was so brilliant. Men over there, women over there, because I could finally concentrate on a relationship with, with God.
And you met the rabbi there?
No.
Oh, you didn't meet the rabbi
I didn't meet the rabbi until after the whole Megillah.
When you went on this path,
yes,
did your mother come along with you?
My mother was very supportive, God bless her. But I had never, my mother is a believer in her faith. But it's very interesting how people react when you start becoming
something else,
observant.
Something.
So all I know is I'm at a kosher restaurant with my mother because I'm eating kosher now. And she sees me saying a blessing over the food before I eat it, and my mother crosses herself.
Yeah,
never in my never in my life has my mother crossed myself. So
it came out.
It came out. She said, "Oh yes, and she crossed herself, and I thought, oh, isn't that beautiful?" So when we,
you mean all the time you were a child? That was like the first kind of inkling of what was coming.
Well, I knew my mother had her own faith, but it was quiet because my father was so strong in the house. It was very quiet and kind of hidden. So,
so she came along your path.
Many different friends of mine from different religions become more observant when they're around me as I practice my faith.
I think that's really good because you're an influence on so many people, and you'll bring people who were maybe afraid to recognize what they were feeling and thinking, bring them out into the public.
Yeah. I have one girlfriend who is from Iraq, and when we're together, just kidding. Everyone.
Don't make me laugh.
Okay.
I have to find out where you met the rabbi because he's so important in your stand-up.
Yes, he
in your one-woman play
in my
at the Odyssey Theater.
Yes, and in my life.
And in your life.
So here I am. I am now an observant Jew doing my thing, and I was going to have lunch with a girlfriend, and she canceled. And I had just gotten my hair blow dried.
Oh God!
You know how that
somewhere.
is. You know how you own the world when you have a good blow dry. And I noticed this man was having lunch by himself, and he seemed to be looking my way. And I knew because of my new Jewish modesty that I couldn't flirt with him directly. So I tried to flirt around him.
And he fell for it.
I don't know if he thought I was nuts or needed a chiropractic adjustment, but he left the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I know, he came back in. And he asked me if I was single. And we started talking, and he called my rabbi, and my rabbi called his rabbi. And
in Hollywood, it's talk to my people.
Yes.
This is talk to my rabbi.
Talk to my rabbi, like a third party. You date through a third party.
That was great.
Yeah, it was really a beautiful coming together.
Did he help you write this?
In his own way. He didn't actually sit down with paper and pen, but he is such a support in my life for me to maintain my faith and have my creativity at the same time to find that balance.
That's so terrific.
Yes.
Have you written anything else besides your one-woman show?
Well, I wrote my whole stand-up act. I used to travel on the road
right.
doing stand-up from comedy clubs to West Point and upstate New York to the evening at the Improv.
Oh, you went to
Okinawa with the troops.
I was going to ask you
Yes.
about that. You
Yes.
traveled
Yes.
to entertain the troops.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
So you were in Guam and someplace else.
Okinawa, yes. And I was so proud of our troops. We are so well protected.
That's so
I was
wonderful.
so proud to be an American. Really, it was just, it was an amazing experience to be on the base to these men and women who fight for our country. They live on the base, they live in countries that are not the U.S. to protect us.
Do you use any of that in your play?
Yes, you'll have to come see.
Oh, you do use that? Oh, okay. And you're directed by
Heidi Crane.
Heidi Crane,
Yes.
right. Did you need someone to come in and direct you, even though you've been doing stand-up for so long?
You always need the third eye.
You do.
Always need a third eye. We don't ever do anything alone, do we?
Well, no,
Yeah.
but the thing is, an actress, and you wrote the material, it always seems to me that you could get up on the stage and be able to do what you want to do.
But it's always so helpful to have that third eye. And Heidi was my scriptwriting teacher for 2 years
so
and watched it develop and fell in love with the show.
I see.
So she was a shoo-in as director.
So can you still do some choreography to 2-4-6-8?
Yes. 2, 4, 6, 8. The Sabbath is coming. Don't be late.
Oh, that's very good. And thank you, Sandy. Sandy's taken us from hot pants, pom-poms, and
Boots. Yes.
to Judaism, marriage, and the rabbi.
That's right.
You've taken us all through everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan, so much.
And thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles, 90017. We'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.